Hi, everybody. Welcome. Today I'm going to be talking about the shades of meaning between words, and it's going to be looking at two concepts called denotation and connotation. Let's get started. So, there are two types of meaning for every single word in English. There's the denotation, which is just the dictionary definition. It's what it means when you look it up in the dictionary, and most words share a similar denotation. But there's a second type of meaning that's a little bit more tricky, which is the connotation. It's the emotional meaning of the word, and we come to understand the connotation not so much through the dictionary, but through repeated use of the word in our natural lives. And so I want to take a look at this by coming up with a list of words that you can think of that might be a synonym for fat. See how many words you can think of. Some of the words I've come up with are thick, full, heavy, round, fluffy, flabby, obese, chubby, large, and overweight, rotund, and plump. And so all of these words have the same denotation. They all more or less mean having a large or excess amount of flesh. This doesn't change, but all of these words have a slightly different connotation. And so emotionally, they have different, subtly different meanings related to health and beauty, right? And so some of these words have a more positive connotation. Thick, full, fluffy, chubby, rotund, and plump, you might find would hurt less if somebody were to call you. Whereas some have a more negative connotation, such as round or flabby, obese, large, overweight, or heavy. These would hurt a lot more if somebody were to call you by these names. And so all of these words have the same dictionary definition. They all mean the same thing, but emotionally they have different impacts. And that's what connotation is. It's the emotional impact of a word. And so not all words are highly connotative. Some are vanilla, like vanilla ice cream, just plain, straightforward. There's not a lot in them. And then some words are like Ben and Jerry's, where you have 100 different flavors into that ice cream, and a lot is packed into the words. And so let's look at some high and low connotation words. And so some low connotation words or vanilla ice cream words might be residence, significant other, group, different, old, or dirty, right? These are basic words. They don't have a lot of emotional meaning packed in with them. But if we were to turn residence into home, that's a more high connotation word. There's a lot of emotional reactions and a lot of emotional meaning tied into the word home. Makes it kind of that Ben and Jerry's style word. There's a lot packed in there. Significant other is vanilla, whereas boyfriend or girlfriend is much higher connotation. A group is vanilla, it's pretty plain. But if you were to call that group a gang or a club, all of a sudden you have a lot more emotional weight to that word. If you were to say somebody's different, that's kind of vanilla. But if you were to say they're weird, that's a way different connotation. Weird brings about this idea of like mad scientists in my mind. It has to do with like somebody, just being way outside what's expected of society. Old is pretty low connotation, but ancient brings about these images of ancient Rome, uh, ancient China, all these places, all these old cultures, right? Ancient Egypt. And dirty, while you might say it has some connotation, it's mainly pretty low connotation, whereas higher connotation would be grimy. It has like a dirtier feel to it. It just feels more negative when you're looking at it. Looking at connotation and culture, we have a comedian named George Carlin who has a skit on what he calls soft language. And this is what we would be calling low connotation words. He seems to have a very negative impression of what is happening with low connotation words. Let's watch.
I don't like words that hide the truth. I don't like words that conceal reality. I don't like euphemisms or euphemistic language. And American English is loaded with euphemisms because Americans have a lot of trouble dealing with reality. Americans have trouble facing the truth. So they invent a kind of a soft language to protect themselves from it. And it gets worse with every generation. For some reason, it just keeps getting worse. I'll give you an example of that. There's a condition in combat. Most people know about it. It's when a fighting person's nervous system has been stressed to its absolute peak and maximum, can't take any more input. The nervous system has either snapped or is about to snap. In the First World War, that condition was called shell shock. Simple, honest, direct language. 2 syllables. Shell shock. Almost sounds like the guns themselves. That was 70 years ago. Then a whole generation went by, and the Second World War came along, and the very same combat condition was called battle fatigue. 4 syllables now. Takes a little longer to say. Doesn't seem to hurt as much. Fatigue is a nicer word than shock. Shell shock. Battle fatigue. Then we had the war in Korea, 1950. Madison Avenue was riding high by that time, and the very same combat condition was called operational exhaustion. Hey, we're up to 8 syllables now. And the humanity has been squeezed completely out of the phrase. It's totally sterile now. Operational exhaustion. Sounds like something that might happen to your car. Then, of course, came the war in Vietnam, which has only been over for about 16 or 17 years. And thanks to the lies and deceit surrounding that war, I guess it's no surprise that the very same condition was called post-traumatic stress disorder. Still 8 syllables, but we've added a hyphen. And the pain is completely buried under jargon. Post-traumatic stress disorder. I'll bet you if we'd have still been calling it shell shock, some of those Vietnam veterans might have gotten the attention they needed at the time. I'll bet you that. I'll bet you that. But it didn't happen. And one of the reasons is because we were using that soft language, that language that takes the life out of life. And it is a function of time. It does keep getting worse. Give you another example. Sometime during my life, toilet paper became bathroom tissue. I wasn't notified of this. No one asked me if I agreed with it. It just happened. Toilet paper became bathroom tissue. Sneakers became running shoes. False teeth became dental appliances. Medicine became medication. Information became directory assistance. The dump became the landfill. Car crashes became automobile accidents. Partly cloudy became partly sunny. Motels became motor lodges. House trailers became mobile homes. Used cars became previously owned transportation. Room service became guest room dining. And constipation became occasional irregularity. When I was a little kid, if I got sick, they wanted me to go to the hospital and see the doctor. Now they want me to go to a health maintenance organization or a wellness center to consult a healthcare delivery professional. Poor people used to live in slums. Now the economically disadvantaged occupy substandard housing in the inner cities.
Okay, and so you get his general idea. He's pointing to the difference between high connotation and low connotation language. And so what he calls soft language is actually what we call low connotation, or that kind of vanilla language that I was talking about earlier. And he makes it sound really negative, which it technically is not. He was trying to make a point through comedy. But the trick in persuasion is to tell when your audience is going to want high connotation language and when it's not going to want it. And so typically, if you're trying to fire up an audience, you're going to want to use those high connotation words because they have a high emotional impact and they're more likely to reach your audience. If you're trying to stop an audience from getting upset, you're going to want to use those low connotation words, the ones that aren't going to get them riled up, as a general rule, although that's not always true. And so, for instance, if you knew you were going to get into a persuasive debate with George Carlin, you know that you would want to use that highly connotative language, as he clearly respects that a lot more than the low connotative language or soft language, like he was saying before. But this is all about having the option. You want the option of choosing which words you're going to use. And so let's practice. I want you to tell me which word in each group has the most favorable connotation. Which one has the connotation you like best? Which one sounds like the best thing to be called? So, if you had to choose between old-fashioned, out of date, or obsolete, which one sounds the best to you? I would say old-fashioned, because out of date and obsolete sound like they don't work anymore, whereas old-fashioned just sounds like it's something from another time. If we were to look at small, little, or petite, which one do you think has the most favorable connotation? I would say petite, because petite is kind of sounds small and cute, whereas small and little sometimes have a connotation that somebody's too small or too little, right? Whereas petite seems to be just a size that shouldn't be any bigger, shouldn't be any smaller. It just is what it is. Which word has the most favorable connotation between prosperous, rich, moneyed, and opulent? Now, this is a little bit different. Opulent clearly has that connotation of being a little bit too much. So I would take that one out right away. Prosperous, however, has kind of a low connotation. It's one of those vanilla words. It describes having money, but it doesn't really do it in an emotional way. And so rich and moneyed would be probably the two that have the highest and most favorable connotation, whereas rich might be the one that you'd want to go to, although the concept of being rich is less favorable as time goes on. At least when you're rich, it's okay. When other people are rich, it's not favorable. All right, and finally, let's look at brainy, intelligent, and smart. Which of these words do you think has the most favorable connotation? Brainy, I would eliminate because it sounds like almost like an insult. Smart is kind of a zero connotation, low connotation word. It doesn't really have a lot of emotion tied to it, whereas intelligent kind of gives the best, most favorable connotation here. Now, let's take a look at some words and see which ones have the most emotional connotation, good or bad, just the most emotional. And so if we're describing um, you know, your children, would you say offspring, children, or progeny? I would say that offspring and progeny have kind of a scientific meaning. There's not a lot of emotional meaning. You don't talk about your progeny in an emotional way, whereas children is kind of that often used, highly emotional word. Which one's more emotional, your brother or your sibling? Sibling, once again, is kind of that clinical, low connotative word, whereas brother might have a lot of meaning associated with it. You could say the same thing with sister. And how about this, prison or detention center? This goes back into that soft language. I'm surprised I didn't see this one on George Carlin's comedy skit. Whereas detention center is much lower connotation. Prison has a higher emotional connotation than detention center. Now, what you're going to want to do is, if you want to remember how to look at the connotation of words, sometimes it's helpful to rank them in order because some words have huge amount of synonyms. And so it's helpful to question, well, where does this word stand in relation to the others? And especially if you are English as a second language learner, this can be really helpful if you can memorize the positivity and negativity of various synonyms. So let's take a look here. I have 10 words that mean the same thing: amazing, surprising, bewildering, stunning, staggering, shocking, breathtaking, spectacular, marvelous, and dismaying. Now, each of these is somewhere in the spectrum from most positive to most negative. And so if we wanted to, we could put them in order to get an understanding of when you would want to use each word. And to think about this, sometimes it helps to put them all in the same sentence. And so I'm going to use the sentence, I think your outfit is blank. And so sometimes it's easiest to get the extremes. Which one would be the most negative and most positive? And so let's start with negative. Which one would you not want somebody saying about your outfit? I think your outfit is, I would be very upset if somebody said dismaying. I think that's the most negative version of this word. Let's go to the other end. What would be the best? What would be the most wonderful thing somebody could say in this situation? I said spectacular. I think your outfit is spectacular. Now, each person's going to have a slightly different idea of what is the best word based upon your own personal experience and connotations, but we're going to generally agree on which ones are most positive and least positive. Well, let's take a look. Can we find a word that's in the middle? What word might go exactly in the middle? And it's okay if your word is different than mine, but I got surprising. Your outfit is surprising. I would be like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Are you saying, I'm not certain where you're going with this. And so let's try and I want to fill out the negative. Which ones are more negative than surprising? Well, I would say shocking, staggering, and bewildering. And let's try to look at which ones are a little bit more positive. Breathtaking. Your outfit is breathtaking. Yes, thank you. Your outfit is marvelous. It's stunning. It's amazing, right? And so each word, all the synonyms are somewhere on a connotative line from positive to negative. And so this is one of the things that you want to think about when you're looking at words and their connotation. Where do they stand in relationship to each other? And once again, this will really help you out, especially if you're an English language learner, because you can kind of memorize which ones are the most positive and most negative. And this all goes into your writing because you want to use connotation in your words effectively. It's really part of that pathos, right? It's a way of managing the emotional argument that you're trying to make in your writing. So the concept of connotative language really comes into play when you're trying to lean an audience in one direction or another. And so I've given here an example. Pretend that you're writing an article about some girl leading a team, right? If you want kind of neutral language, you might call this an influential girl who's instructing the team. However, there will be times where you want to make this girl look more negative without directly saying anything negative about them. You could change this same sentence by changing the connotation by saying the bossy girl told the team what to do. Now, this has the same general meaning. You're not changing the meaning of the sentence, but you're changing the connotation of what this girl is doing. You're making her seem bossy and telling people what to do. On the other hand, you may want to make this girl seem more positive, right? And so you could say the inspiring girl led the team. And so all three of these sentences technically have the same denotative meaning, but they all have very different connotations. And this is how you play around with it when you're using language. Another example of this could be saying, if you're talking about a teacher giving homework, you could say the teacher punishes us by assigning homework. And so here the message is that in order to control their class, this teacher is giving homework as a punishment. Well, if you wanted to make this teacher look more negative, you could say the teacher terrorizes us by piling homework on us. And so terrorizes is a highly connotative word, has a lot of emotional meaning, negative emotional meaning. And piling homework on top of us is a metaphor, right? It's not that the teacher's just assigning or giving it, like crushing students under the weight of this homework. Whereas if you want to make this teacher look more positive, you could say the teacher redirects us by giving us homework. Giving is a very positive word. People want to be given things typically. And redirect is a much more positive word than punishes. You know, you punish somebody or you redirect them, right? And so this is how connotative language can come into play when you're writing. You're using subtle changes in the words you use in order to change the meaning of what it is that you're writing. And so let's take a look at your assignment. Your assignment is just going to be like that line. And so if you look at Google Classroom, you'll find this mastering connotation assignment. And so the main purpose of this is to get you to recognize the shades of meaning that come out between words. And so what I have for you here is I've given you 10 words of my choice, and then I want you to choose 2 of your own. And for each word, I want you to have at least 6 additional synonyms ranked from most positive to most negative, just like we did on that synonym line. I'll also ask you to describe in a few sentences why you rank them that way. So, for instance, here, if I were to do the word thin, I put the neutral connotation word right in the middle. If I were to do thin and I wanted to come up with synonyms that were both positive and negative and put them in order from most positive to most negative, I would do it this way. Going up more positive, thin, well, skinny is slightly more positive. Slender is more positive than that. Lean is even more positive. Svelte is even more positive. And slim, I think, is the most positive version of that word. But going in the other direction for thin, lanky, bony, emaciated, and anorexic. Those are more negative. And so when I have to explain this, I said the negative words associated with being thin usually have a connotation of being somehow unhealthy. Emaciated and anorexic were the most unhealthy and therefore the most negative. The positive words related to thin usually implied strength or beauty, right? And so this is what you're going to be doing with your assignment. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll see that there's different charts. And so I want you to create a ranking from most positive to most negative for these words. This will help you when you're writing, because if you want to tell somebody that they are wrong, you want to know the different ways to do it. You want to have positive ways to tell them that they're wrong. If you're really trying to insult them, you want to have really negative ways to tell them that they're wrong. If they're right, you want to have positive ways to do this. You want to have negative ways to do this. If something is bad, you want to be able to shed it in a positive light. You want to shed it in a negative light if it's really bad. Same thing with things being good. So the word that I want you to find synonyms for is for in the middle. And I want you to get at least 6 other synonyms and rank them from most positive to most negative. And I'm assuming that this word is going to be somewhere in the middle. For each, write a brief explanation, 2, 3, 4 sentences at the most, of why you put those words in that order. And so the other words are new, old, use, the verb, as in to use something, influence, the verb, as in to influence something, important and dangerous. Those are the words that you're going to find synonyms for and rank. You'll see that there are 2 blank sections. You get to choose 2 words of your choice. Please don't choose fat or amazing, because I've already done those ones in the lesson and I don't want you just copying what I did before. Try to come up with new words that we haven't covered yet. Words that'll be useful for you to use as you're writing your argumentative writing. The whole point of this is I want you to get used to thinking of the connotation of your word and choosing the word that has the correct connotation for your message and your audience. And if you can master connotation, you will become much more persuasive. And so once again, this document should be submitted to a Google Doc in Google Classroom. And I recommend having it done by the 23rd, which is Wednesday of next week, by 12 o'clock. Thank you guys, and hopefully if you have any questions, you'll ask me when we get back to class. Good luck on your connotation assignment, and I will see you next time.